Ma, they are in the dump. 7-year-old Lemmy's fingers locked around Della Voss's leather sleeve as the landfill wind howled. He dragged her down the slick gravel path to 2 taped plastic bins half buried in rot and rain. Della tore open the first, tiny clothes, a baby blanket, and a duct-taped envelope. Then the second bin kicked back from the inside. She ripped the lid off and pulled out a little girl, alive, blue-lipped, barely breathing. Della ran uphill with the child as sirens flooded the dump and strangers filmed her like she was the criminal. At the hospital, Della opened the envelope, and a photo of her dead husband in his old biker cut slid into her hands. If you stand for justice, hit subscribe. People like Brick hate witnesses. Della Voss didn't scare easy. That was the thing Blackwater liked to pretend about her, that she was some monster who didn't feel anything. But when Lemmy whispered those words, her body reacted before her mind could argue. Ma, they are in the dump. He was small for 7, all elbows and thin wrists, wearing a hoodie that had lost its softness years ago. His shoes were the kind that folded at the toes, and his hair stuck up in the back like he had slept in a bad place. Lemmy never cried in front of people. He had learned that early. But his voice shook now, and his hand squeezed her sleeve like he was afraid she might vanish if he loosened his grip. The Blackwater County landfill sat outside town like a bruise on the land. A long road cut through dead weeds and rusted signs that said, "No trespassing." Della didn't come here unless she had to. The dump was where people put things they didn't want to look at. Lemmy led her past a chain-link gap he clearly already knew about. That made Della's stomach tighten. "You've been here alone?" she asked. Lemmy nodded, not meeting her eyes. "Sometimes. It's where the shiny ring man said I should go." Della stopped walking. "The what?" But Lemmy pulled again, urgent. "Ma, please. Before they wake up." "They," Della repeated. "Who's they?" He just pointed, like his finger could explain what his mouth couldn't. Della followed him down a slope of wet gravel and broken glass. The smell hit first. Old food, chemicals, sour plastic. Gulls screamed above them and dropped lower, as if they had been waiting. At the bottom, a torn black tarp clung to the mud. 2 plastic storage bins sat half-buried like someone had tried to hide them fast. Their lids were taped shut with thick gray tape, wrapped around and around until it looked like a cocoon. Della's heart began to beat harder, slower, the way it did right before trouble arrived. Lemmy pointed with both hands now. "There. That's them." Della crouched. The tape was fresh. The bins weren't sun-faded. Somebody had put them here recently, and not by accident. She ran a fingernail along the tape. On the corner, someone had pressed a mark into it with a hard object, like the faint stamp of a symbol. Della didn't recognize the exact shape, but it felt familiar in her bones, like a thing she had seen in another life. She looked back at Lemmy. His lips were chapped. His eyes stayed on the bins, not on her. "Did you touch them?" she asked. He shook his head fast. "No. I heard it." He leaned closer and lowered his voice. "Not trash, Ma. Not dogs. It's people." Della swallowed. She grabbed the tape on the first bin and pulled. It resisted like it had teeth. She yanked harder until it snapped with a sharp rip that echoed across the trash hill. The lid popped. Inside were children's clothes. A small shirt with cartoon dinosaurs. A baby blanket with faded moon patterns. A single pink shoe with a broken strap. The sight of it made Della's throat close, because it wasn't just stuff. It was a life that belonged to somebody. Tucked under the blanket was an envelope wrapped in duct tape, like someone wanted it to survive rain, dirt, and time. Della stared at it, feeling the weight of it without even touching it. Then Lemmy whispered, "Ma, I heard a sound, like someone going inside." Della froze so hard her knees ached. Her eyes snapped to the second bin. For a moment, there was nothing but the wind and the screaming gulls. Then, thump, a weak knock from inside the plastic. Small, desperate, like a heartbeat trapped in a box. Della's skin went cold. She ripped at the tape on the second bin, fingers slipping, nails scraping. Lemmy backed up, scared, but he didn't run. He just stood there, shaking, like he needed to see it to believe it. The tape came loose. Della threw the lid off. A little girl lay curled in the dark, eyes half open, lips blue, breath so thin it looked like it might disappear. Della didn't think. She scooped the child into her arms, wrapped her in her leather jacket, and pressed the girl against her chest like she could force warmth into her with willpower. "Hey," Della whispered, voice breaking. "Hey, sweetheart." Stay with me. The girl's lashes fluttered. No sound came out. Della stood and started running uphill, boots slipping on wet gravel. She shouted for help, for anyone, for the landfill workers whose machines groaned in the distance. A man in an orange vest saw her and staggered back. What the? Call 911. Della screamed. Now. Another worker pulled out his phone, not to call for help, but to record. Della saw the lens pointed at her and felt the old familiar hate in her chest. They were going to make her the story. The sirens came fast, like the county had been waiting for an excuse. Blue and red lights crawled across the trash piles. Deputy Kalbrenner stepped out of his cruiser, eyes narrowing the second he saw Della holding the child. What did you do, Voss? He demanded. Della stared at him like he was the dumbest man alive. I saved her. Cal's gaze flicked to Lemmy, who had finally caught up, panting, face streaked with dirt. And why is he here? Lemmy shrank behind Della's leg. Della shifted her body, blocking Cal's view of the boy. The move was automatic, protective, and it made the workers whisper. Cal stepped closer. This is a crime scene. Della held the child tighter. Then stop talking and get her help. An ambulance door slammed. Paramedics rushed in. One of them tried to take the girl, and for a second Della didn't want to let go, like releasing the child would mean the world could steal her again. Finally, she did. The girl vanished into the ambulance. The door shut. Cal stared at Della like she was the problem that needed solving. Where did you find her? In the dump, Della said. In a bin. Taped shut. Cal's face tightened. A deputy jogged up holding the duct-taped envelope in an evidence bag. We found this with the clothes. Della's eyes locked on the envelope. Something about it felt aimed at her, like a bullet with her name carved into it. Cal noticed her stare. You recognize that? Della forced her face into calm. No. But her stomach said yes. Because a part of her knew this wasn't just a rescue. It was a setup. And Lemmy, sweet, trembling Lemmy, was the rope someone used to pull her straight into it. As the ambulance pulled away, Lemmy tugged Della's sleeve and whispered, Ma, the shiny ring man is gonna be mad. The hospital in Blackwater was small, the kind with quiet hallways and old floor tiles that never looked clean no matter how hard people scrubbed. The air smelled like bleach and burnt coffee. Della sat on a plastic chair under a buzzing light, hands still shaking like her body hadn't gotten the message that the danger was over. But it wasn't over. Lemmy sat beside her with his feet not touching the floor, swinging them without realizing. Every few seconds, he glanced down the hallway like he expected someone to appear and grab him. Across from them, Deputy Kalbrenner leaned against the wall with his arms folded, watching Della like she might bolt. A nurse with tired eyes came out and spoke softly. The little girl is stable. Hypothermia, dehydration, bruising. We're running tests. Bruising. Della's jaw clenched. That single word painted pictures she didn't want in her head. Can I see her? Della asked. The nurse hesitated and glanced at Cal. Cal answered for her. No, not yet. Della stood. I found her. I saved her. She doesn't know anyone else. Cal's voice stayed calm, but his eyes were sharp. That doesn't make you her guardian. Lemmy's small hand found Della's again. Della looked down at him, and the way he held on broke something in her chest. She lowered her voice. Cal, don't do this in front of him. Cal's gaze slid to Lemmy. What's your name, kid? Lemmy swallowed. Lemmy. Last name. Lemmy froze. He didn't know? Or he didn't want to say? Della stepped in. He's with me. Cal's mouth twitched like he didn't believe that sentence could be true in any good way. You're with a lot of things, Voss. Della didn't react to the jab. She had heard worse. She was still hearing it. Even now. Whispers in the waiting room. People pointing. The older couple who stared like Della's leather jacket was a weapon. The nurse returned with a clipboard. We need information. Does anyone know the child's name? Della shook her head. Not yet. The nurse nodded. We'll list her as Jane Doe for now. Della's hands tightened. A child without a name felt like a crime. Cal stepped away to take a call. Della watched him pace near the vending machines, his voice low. When he looked back at her, his expression had changed. Less suspicion, more calculation. That worried her more. A second nurse appeared, this one younger, hair tucked under a cap, and she carried a sealed plastic bag. These were on the child. No ID. But this, she tapped the bag. Inside was a small cloth bracelet with a stitched moon pattern, matching the blanket from the bin. Della felt a chill crawl over her arms. Where's the envelope? Della asked. Cal ended his call and turned. Evidence. Della stared at him. What was inside it? Cal's eyes flicked, just for a second, like a man thinking about how much truth to give. Nothing that concerns you. Della stepped closer. If someone dumped a child like trash, it concerns everyone. Cal leaned in. And if you're connected to it, it concerns you the most. Lemmy suddenly whispered, Ma, I didn't touch the bins. I swear. Della crouched beside him. Hey, look at me. Lemmy's eyes filled. The shiny ring man said, I had to show you. He said you'd know what to do. Della's stomach dropped. Did he say his name? Lemmy shook his head hard. No, but he had a ring that shined. Like a coin. Della's mind pulled up a face. Brick Mullen. Landfill owner. Church donor. The kind of man who smiled for photos and never got his hands dirty, because he had other people to do it. Della straightened slowly. Cal watched her. You just thought of something. Della kept her voice steady. A man threatened this kid. Cal's eyebrows lifted. And you're telling me now? I'm telling you because a child almost died, Della snapped. Not because you suddenly deserve my trust. Cal's eyes narrowed. You don't get to decide what I deserve. He motioned to another deputy near the door. Take the boy's statement. Lemmy flinched so hard his shoulders rose to his ears. No, Della said instantly. Cal's voice hardened. That's not your call. Della stepped between Lemmy and the deputy. Phones in the waiting area lifted again. A woman whispered, Here we go. Della felt the trap tightening. If she fought, she looked guilty. If she stepped aside, Lemmy would be alone with strangers, and whoever threatened him would win. She forced her hands open, palms down, showing she wasn't a threat. Cal, let me sit with him while he talks. Cal hesitated. And in that hesitation, Della saw something else. Fear. Not fear of her. Fear of someone above him. A hospital TV played quietly in the corner. A local news segment rolled footage from the landfill. Della running with the child, the bin in the background, the headline already forming without her permission. Hell's Angel woman found with child at dump. Della's throat tightened. Lemmy whispered again, barely audible. Ma, he's gonna be mad. He said don't tell. Della looked at Cal and made her decision. If the law wouldn't protect them, she would. And if Brick Mullen was behind this, then the real war wasn't at the dump. It was in the places people called respectable. Down the hallway, heavy boots echoed, slow, calm steps. And the nurse at the station suddenly went quiet as two leather-clad men appeared at the entrance. The boots stopped at the nurse's station. Della didn't turn right away. She watched Lemmy instead, his small hands twisting the hem of his hoodie, his eyes glued to the floor. The deputy beside them shifted his weight, trying to look relaxed and failing. Ma, Lemmy whispered. Those sound like your friends. Della almost laughed at that. Friends. That wasn't what Blackwater called the men who wore the same patch she once patched on her husband's cut. Finally, she looked up. Two men stood at the nurse's station. One was tall, with a shaved head and eyes the color of wet concrete. The other was wiry, his hair pulled back, a faded leather vest hanging open over a gray shirt. The patch on his chest was familiar, a skull and a winged helmet, the emblem people in town spat about after saying Hell's Angels. They weren't yelling. They weren't causing a scene. They were just there, taking up space the way gravity did. The nurse behind the counter lowered her voice when she spoke to them. The tall one leaned in, nodded once, and glanced down the hall. His eyes found Della. For a second, everything in her went still. A memory flashed. Her husband, Rowan Voss, laughing in a parking lot years ago, the same patch on his back, the same quiet weight in his shoulders. A different hospital, a different night, a different kind of waiting. The tall man didn't smile. He just looked at her like she was a problem he had heard stories about. Deputy Cal straightened. You can't be back here. The tall man's voice was calm. We heard a child was hurt. We're checking on a family matter. The word family made Della's skin prickle. Cal stepped closer. This is an active investigation. You and your family can wait outside. Della watched the exchange with tired eyes. People loved to clash over her when the real danger moved under their feet. The wiry biker lifted his hands, palms out, showing empty fingers. Easy, deputy. We're not here to start anything. The tall man's gaze slid back to Della. We're just making sure no one throws away something that belongs to us again. Della's heart stumbled over that word, again. Before Cal could answer, a doctor stepped out of Lila's room. His coat was wrinkled, glasses slipping down his nose. He scanned a chart, then looked up. Family of the little girl? Silence held for a split second. Then 3 directions answered at once. The nurse's eyes went to the bikers, out of fear. Cal's chin jerked toward Della, out of suspicion. Della herself didn't move, because she didn't know if she was allowed to claim that word. Lemmy spoke first. "She's with Ma," he said, pointing to Della. The doctor blinked. "You're the one who found her?" Della stood. "Yes." The doctor's face softened in a way Cal's never did. "She's stable. Dehydrated, underfed, but strong. Kids can be tougher than they look." "What's her name?" Della asked. "For now." The doctor shrugged. "She's answering to nothing. No speech yet. We're calling her Lila because of the bracelet." He nodded toward the bag with the moon-patterned cloth. "Lila," Della repeated, the name settling in her chest like it had been waiting there for years. The doctor glanced at the bikers, then at Cal. "We will need to know who's allowed in that room." Cal stepped forward. "Until we sort out where she came from, no one goes and accepts staff. We don't want anyone influencing her memory or contaminating this case." Della's jaw tightened. "She's not evidence." Cal ignored her. The tall biker shifted his stance. "You got a warrant to keep a child from seeing the only familiar face she might have." Cal turned on him. "And you are?" The man didn't answer. His eyes stayed on Della, curious now. "She's changed since Rowan," he said, almost to himself. More weight in the eyes. Della's chest pulled tight. "You knew him?" The wiry biker snorted. "Everyone knew him." Cal's head snapped between them. "We are not doing this here." The doctor, suddenly uncomfortable, handed the chart back to the nurse. "I'll be in my office if you need me." As he walked away, another nurse approached Della quietly. Her badge read, Araye Calder. Her dark hair was pulled into a clean bun, and there was a fierce kindness in her eyes. "Ma'am," Rhea said softly, "I shouldn't do this, but the envelope they found, it's logged at the front desk. You didn't hear that from me." Della's heart sped up. "Thank you." Rhea's gaze dropped to Lemmy. "Make sure he eats something. The vending machine food won't kill him as fast as whatever he's been surviving on." Then she walked away. Della looked at Lemmy. "Stay in this chair. Don't talk to anyone unless it's me or Nurse Rhea." "Got it." Lemmy nodded, lower lip caught between his teeth. Della turned and walked toward the front desk. The envelope sat behind the counter in a clear plastic bag, tagged and labeled. A clerk chewed gum while scrolling on her phone. She glanced up lazily when Della cleared her throat. "I need to see that," Della said. The clerk frowned. "Ma'am, that's evidence," Della finished. "I know. I just want to look, not touch." The clerk hesitated, then sighed. 15 seconds. "If my supervisor asks." "I was in the bathroom." She lifted the bag, holding it at an angle where Della could see. The envelope was dirty, edges softened by moisture, duct taped shut. On the outside, in black marker, someone had written a date, 7 years ago. Della's blood ran cold. 7 years. The same year she lost a baby. She swallowed hard. "Turn it." The clerk flipped the bag. A photograph had been slipped halfway out of the open side, like someone in the chain had already peeked. The photo had shifted to face the plastic. Rowan Voss stared out at her. Younger, harder, but definitely him. His arm was wrapped around a young woman in a thrift store dress. Behind them, a row of bikes lined a parking lot. The patch on his cut matched the one on the men in the hallway. Della choked on air. The clerk noticed. "You okay?" Della couldn't answer. The world narrowed to that image, that date, that man she had buried with a head full of questions and a heart full of excuses. 7 years ago, she was told her baby had died. 7 years ago, this envelope was sealed. Her throat burned. Her hands trembled. The clerk lowered the bag. "Time's up." Della walked back down the hallway like her feet didn't belong to her. The bikers still stood by the nurse's station. Kel talked into his radio, pretending not to watch her, and failing. Lemmy waited in the chair where she left him, eyes wide, knees bouncing. "Ma," he asked, "did you see something bad?" Della couldn't trust her voice. She sat down slowly, every muscle buzzing. On the TV, the news replayed the dump footage. The caption changed, "Investigation underway." Questions about local crime ties. The anchor's voice floated through the hall. "Sources say the woman involved has past connections to a well-known motorcycle club." Della squeezed her eyes shut. In the darkness behind her eyelids, she saw the date on the envelope again. 7 years ago. The year someone told her, "I'm sorry, Della. The baby didn't make it." Her stomach twisted. If that was true, then this envelope was just a cruel coincidence. If it wasn't, then everything she believed about her husband, her grief, and the club was a lie. The words came out of Lemmy's mouth like they hurt. Lila is yours. Della opened her eyes. Say that again, she said quietly. Lemmy's little chest rose and fell too fast. He said Lila is yours. That's what he told me. The shiny ring man. The hallway sounds, the beeping machines, the squeaking carts, the distant TV, faded under a low hum in Della's ears. She felt the ground tilt. Lemmy, she said, forcing her voice to stay gentle. Show me with your hands. How big was the ring? Lemmy's fingers made a circle the size of a nickel. Like this. And it had lines on it. Engraving. Brick Mullen's ring had lines. She had seen them at fundraisers, at town meetings, at the diner when he shook hands with people who liked the way his money smelled. Brick wore that ring like a crown on his finger. Della swallowed. What else did he say? Lemmy glanced toward the entrance, toward the main doors, like the man might be standing there now. He said you threw things away that weren't yours to throw. His voice dropped to a whisper. He said you threw away a baby. The sentence shattered something old and fragile inside Della. She took a slow breath. Lemmy, look at me. He did. You did nothing wrong. You hear me? Nothing. Tears filled his eyes. I didn't tell. I just showed you the place like he said. I thought maybe you could fix it. The simple faith in his voice wrecked her more than the accusation. Della placed her hand over his. You did the bravest thing a kid can do. You asked for help. Down the hall, the tall biker pushed off the nurse's station and walked toward them. His boots made soft sounds on the tile. The wiry biker followed, hands still empty, posture loose but alert. Deputy Kell stepped in their path. I told you. We're not here to fight. Brenner, the tall one said. His tone was flat, almost bored. If we were, this building would feel different. Cal's jaw tightened. The tall man stopped a few feet from Della. Up close, she could see the lines at the corners of his eyes, the small scar near his left ear, the way his eyes softened a fraction when they landed on Lemmy. Della Voss, he said. Been a long time since anyone saw you on our side of things. Della met his gaze. I'm not on any side. He gave a small, humorless smile. That's the kind of thing people say right before they remember they didn't pick their first side alone. The wiry biker chuckled under his breath. Kel stepped closer. You know her? The tall man didn't look at him. Rowan's widow. Cal's eyebrows jumped. Rowan Voss. The one who. Della cut him off. We're not doing that story in front of a kid. The tall man dipped his head slightly, a flicker of respect. Name's Cade Murrow. This is Jackson Sims. We rode with Rowan when he was more useful and less dead. Lemmy blinked up at him. Are you bad guys? Jackson grinned. Depends who's asking. Cade crouched so he was level with Lemmy. We're the kind of men who don't like kids in trash cans. That work for you? Lemmy thought about it, then nodded once. Cade stood. We heard a rumor. Little girl in a bin. Hints about old business. Our business. Cal snorted. You mean crime. Cade's eyes flicked to him. I mean unfinished work. Della felt pulled in three directions. Her past with Rowan and the club, Lemmy's trembling hand in hers, and Brick's invisible ring tightening around all of it. Did Brick send you? She asked. Cade's jaw moved just enough to show tension. Brick Mullen doesn't send us. He calls men in suits. And they call men with clean nails who move paper around until blood looks like ink. Jackson added. Brick called in a favor a while back. Something about making sure certain records stayed buried. We said no. He found another crowd. Della's pulse jumped. What records? Cade's gaze sharpened on her. Why were you asking, Della? She thought of the 7-year-old date on the envelope. The photo of Rowan with a woman she didn't know. The words, you don't know what you protected. I saw something, Della said. I need to know if I've been grieving a ghost or a lie. Cade watched her a long moment. Then he glanced at Cal. You got somewhere private we can talk that doesn't have a camera pointed at it? Cal crossed his arms. There is no we here. Cade stepped closer. His voice dropped so only Cal and Della could hear. Listen, deputy. Somebody put a child in a bin on land Brick controls. Somebody used Rowan's past to bait Della. Somebody is playing with old club business and county law at the same time. You really think you're big enough to handle that alone? Cal's nostrils flared. For the first time, Della saw him hesitate not out of arrogance, but out of a small, sharp fear he was trying to hide. Cal's radio crackled. A voice muttered something about media in the lobby, about phones and questions he didn't have answers for yet. He exhaled through his nose. Fine. 10 minutes. Conference room. And Della stays where I can see her. Della looked at Lemmy. I'm not leaving you. Nurse Rhea reappeared as if summoned by worry. He can sit at the nurse's station with me, she said. We've got coloring pages. And I don't scare easy either. Lemmy bit his lip. You're coming back? Della nodded. You couldn't get rid of me if you tried. He gave a tiny smile at that. As Della walked toward the conference room with Cade, Jackson, and Cal, she felt a familiar weight settle across her shoulders. This was how it felt years ago, sitting at a table while men talked about risk and loyalty and rules carved into skin instead of paper. She had walked away from that world. Now someone had dragged her back by the heart. The conference room was small, with a long table, uncomfortable chairs, and a stale smell of old coffee. Cal shut the door. Cade stood at the head of the table, arms folded. Jackson leaned against the wall, tapping his boot. Cal wasted no time. Here's how this goes. You talk, I listen, and I decide what matters to this case. Cade smirked. Sure, lawman. You keep your badge on the table, and we'll keep ours on our backs. Della cut through the posturing. 7 years ago, I was told my baby died. Silence settled. She continued. Today, at the dump, I found a little girl in a bin. At the hospital, I saw an envelope dated 7 years ago. Inside was a photo of Rowan with another woman, and a note that said I don't know what I protected. Cal's face went still. Cade's eyes darkened. Jackson stopped tapping his boot. Della's voice wavered once, then steadied. Lemmy says a man with a shiny ring told him Lila is mine, that I threw something away that didn't belong to me. Cade's jaw tightened. Brick, he said. Cal frowned. That doesn't prove. It proves pattern, Cade cut in. 7 years ago, Brick wanted a shipment moved without paperwork. We said no. 2 weeks later, Rowan went on that run anyway, but not under our banner. Different crew. Different rules. Della's stomach flipped. What run? Cade looked right at her. Hospital records. Birth certificates. Adoption files. Things that decide who belongs to who. The room felt suddenly too small. Cal shook his head. You expect me to believe some businessman is running around stealing babies? Cade's stare didn't blink. I expect you to believe men with money hate limits. And kids without voices don't complain when they're moved. Della's hand went to the back of a chair, needing something solid. If what Cade said was true, then her baby's death could have been a transfer. A decision made without her, over her, around her, to someone like Brick. She took a breath that tasted like metal. If Lila is mine, if someone lied, I need proof. Cade nodded slowly. Then we start where liars store their trophies. Jackson straightened. Storage units. Landfill records. Brick's quiet places. Della reached under her shirt and pulled out a thin chain with a key hanging from it. Rowan's old storage unit key. I kept this, she said, even when I threw everything else away. Cade's eyes locked onto it. Unit 19. Della nodded. Cade exchanged a look with Jackson. Rowan always said if things went bad, 19 held the truth. Cal scoffed. You think I'm gonna let you go rummaging through some dead biker's secrets in the middle of a kidnapping case? Della met his eyes. If those secrets explain why a child was left in your county's trash, you don't have a choice. Cade leaned over the table, voice low and sharp. If you believe kids shouldn't be treated like garbage, you better act like it, deputy. Cal's mouth flattened. Outside the room, a code announcement blared over the hospital speakers. Nurses hurried by. The world kept moving while their little war brewed. Della closed her fist around the key until the metal dug into her palm. Somebody had thrown away her past and hoped time would bury it. They were about to dig it up. Cal's radio crackled again, this time with a panicked voice from the nurse's station. We need officers up here now. The girl in room 12 is missing. The radio static cut through the conference room like a blade. Officers to the second floor, stat. Patient in room 12 is gone. Repeat. Jane Doe, age approximately 5, is missing from her room. Della's heart stopped. Lila. She didn't wait for permission. She shoved past Cal, yanked the door open, and sprinted down the hallway. Behind her, Cade and Jackson followed without a word. Cal shouted something about protocol, but his voice disappeared under the rush of blood in Della's ears. The nurse's station was chaos. Rhea stood at the center, hands shaking, face pale. I only stepped away for 2 minutes. 2 minutes to get her water. When I came back, the bed was empty. The window was locked from the inside. The door was still open. Della grabbed Ria's shoulders. Where's Lemmy? Ria pointed to the corner. Lemmy sat huddled under a counter, knees pulled to his chest, eyes wide and wet. Della dropped to her knees in front of him. Lemmy, did you see anything? He nodded, lips trembling. A man came. He had a white coat like the doctor's. But he didn't look at anyone. He just went in her room and came back out holding something. What? Della's voice cracked. What was he holding? A bag, Lemmy whispered. Like the trash bags. Della's stomach twisted so hard she thought she might be sick. Jackson cursed under his breath. They moved her in a bag. Cade pulled out his phone and started typing fast. I'm calling the exits. If someone walked out with a laundry bag, someone saw it. Cal finally caught up, breathless, face red. Everyone stay where you are. This is a hospital security issue now. Della stood and turned on him. Security? You think this is about security? Cal's hand went to his belt, a reflexive move that made Della's blood boil. I think you need to step back before I have to. Before you have to what? Della's voice dropped to something cold and sharp. Arrest the woman who saved her? Arrest the kid who tried to help? Or maybe you'll just stand here and let whoever took her vanish because you're too proud to admit you don't know what's happening in your own county. Cal's jaw worked. You don't know what you're talking about. Cade stepped between them, not aggressive, just present. She knows more than you think, deputy. And if you're smart, you'll start asking who benefits from this girl disappearing before the real questions get asked. Cal's eyes flicked to Cade, then back to Della. What questions? Della's chest heaved. Who called you to the dump today? Who told you to treat this like I was the suspect instead of the rescue? Who made sure that envelope stayed locked up so I couldn't see it until now? Cal's face tightened. Della leaned in. And who has enough pull in this hospital to walk in dressed like staff and walk out with a child? Cal didn't answer. Because he couldn't. Or worse, because he knew. A doctor jogged up, out of breath, holding a tablet. Deputy Brenner, we pulled the security footage from the hallway. Cal grabbed the tablet and tilted the screen. Della moved close enough to see. The video showed a man in a white coat and surgical mask walking toward room 12. His stride was calm, unhurried. He entered, stayed inside for less than 30 seconds, then walked back out carrying a bulky laundry bag over his shoulder. The bag shifted once. Della's throat closed. Zoom in on his hands, Cade said. The doctor tapped the screen. The image expanded. On the man's right hand, clear as daylight, was a ring. Silver. Engraved. Della felt the air leave her lungs. Brick, she whispered. Cal's face went white. That's not possible. Jackson snorted. Why? Because he donates to your sheriff's campaign. Cal turned on him. Because Brick Mullen doesn't do his own dirty work. Cade's voice was deadly calm. Then maybe he's getting desperate. Della didn't wait for them to finish arguing. She grabbed Lemmy's hand and headed for the stairwell. Where are you going? Cal shouted. Della didn't look back. To find her before you lose her again. Cade and Jackson fell and stepped beside her. Cal hesitated for just a moment, long enough for Della to see the crack in his armor. Fear. Not of her. Not of the bikers. Fear of what would happen if he went against the wrong person. Brenner, Cade called over his shoulder. You can come with us, or you can explain to the FBI why you let a trafficked child vanish on your watch. Cal's radio crackled again. This time it was the sheriff's voice. Brenner, what's your 20? We need you at the station. Now. Cal stared at the radio like it was a snake. Then he made his choice. He followed Della. They hit the parking lot at full speed. The night air was cold, sharp, smelling faintly of rain and exhaust. Della scanned the lot, looking for movement, for anything out of place. Lemmy pointed. There. A black SUV sat idling near the far exit, headlights off, engine running. Della's instincts screamed. Cade motioned to Jackson. Block the exit. Jackson sprinted toward his bike, a heavy cruiser parked near the entrance. He fired it up and rolled it across the narrow driveway, cutting off the SUV's escape route. Della ran toward the vehicle, Lemmy behind her, Cal somewhere in the middle trying to keep up. The SUV's driver saw them coming. The engine revved, but Jackson's bike was already in the way. The driver slammed the brakes. The door flew open. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a hospital security uniform that didn't fit quite right. Step back, he shouted, hand moving to his belt. Cal drew his weapon. Hands where I can see them. The man froze. Della moved past Cal, ignoring his shout of protest. She yanked open the back door of the SUV. Inside, Tucked between the seats was a laundry bag. It moved. Della tore the bag open. Lila stared up at her, eyes glassy, mouth taped shut, but alive. Della's hands shook as she pulled the tape off gently. "I got you, sweetheart. I got you." Lila didn't cry. She just gripped Della's jacket with both tiny fists like she was holding on to the only solid thing left in the world. Behind her, Cal handcuffed the driver. "Who sent you?" The man stayed silent. Cade crouched beside the SUV, inspecting the interior. He pulled out a folder from under the front seat. Inside were documents, birth certificates, adoption papers, hospital transfer forms. All blank. All waiting to be filled in. Cade's face went dark. "This isn't a rescue. This is a business." Della held Lila tighter. Cal grabbed the folder and flipped through it, his face going from confusion to horror to fury in the span of seconds. This is organized," Cal said, voice hollow. "This is county level." Della looked at him, her voice raw. "Now do you believe me?" Cal stared at the documents like they were written in a language he didn't want to learn. Then his radio crackled again. This time, the voice was different. Calm. Authoritative. "Brenner, this is Sheriff Landry. Stand down and return to the station." "That's an order." Cal's hand hovered over the radio. Kate stood. "If you answer that, you're choosing a side." Cal's jaw clenched. Della held Lila close and looked Cal dead in the eye. "If you walk away now, you're throwing her away again." For a long, terrible moment, no one moved. Then Cal turned off his radio. "I'm staying," he said quietly. Della exhaled. But the relief lasted only a second. Because headlights flooded the parking lot. 3 patrol cars, sirens off, rolling in slow and deliberate. Sheriff Landry stepped out of the lead car, hands on his belt, face unreadable. "Deputy Brenner," he called across the lot. "You're relieved of duty." Effective immediately. Cal's face went pale. Della felt the trap snap shut. The betrayal wasn't coming. It was already here. From the shadows near the hospital entrance, a man stepped into the light, silver ring glinting under the fluorescent glow. Brick Mullen smiled like he owned the air they breathed. Brick Mullen didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Sheriff," he said, smooth as oil. "I appreciate you getting here so quickly. This situation has gotten messy." Sheriff Landry nodded once, his face carved from stone. "Mr. Mullen called me personally. Said there might be a misunderstanding involving Deputy Brenner." Cal's fists clenched. "Sir, this isn't a misunderstanding. We just pulled a kidnapped child out of a vehicle. There are documents in there, blank adoption papers, forged transfer forms." Landry held up a hand. "I'll handle the evidence, Brenner. You've done enough." The words landed like a slap. Della stepped forward, still holding Lila. "Sheriff, if you think this is over, you're either blind or bought." Landry's eyes moved to her, cold and measuring. "Ms. Voss, I suggest you step away from the child. You're not family. You're not authorized. And given your history, you're the last person who should be involved." Della's blood turned to ice. "My history." Brick spoke again, his voice calm, almost sympathetic. "Della, I know you've been through a lot. Losing Rowan. The baby. It's tragic, really. But clinging to someone else's child because you're grieving, that's not healthy." Della's vision narrowed. "You son of a..." Cade's hand landed on her shoulder. Not restraining, just grounding. He stepped forward instead. "Brick, you're standing in a parking lot with a kidnapped kid, a driver in cuffs, and evidence that links back to your landfill. You really want to play the concerned citizen card?" Brick's smile didn't waver. "I'm here because I care about this community. And because I want to make sure a traumatized child isn't used as a pawn in some vendetta against law enforcement." Jackson let out a low, bitter laugh. "Man, you're good. I almost believed you for a second." Sheriff Landry's hand moved to his sidearm. "That's enough." The patrol officers behind him shifted, hands near their belts. The air thickened. Della felt Lila tremble against her chest. She whispered into the girl's hair, "I'm not letting go. I promise." Cal stepped between Della and the sheriff. "Sir, with all due respect, if you take that child without running her through the system, you're aiding in a cover-up." Landry's jaw tightened. "Brenner, you're suspended. Turn in your badge." Cal didn't move. Landry's voice dropped. "Now." Cal's hand went to his belt. Slowly, he unclipped his badge and held it out. But he didn't hand it over. Instead, he looked at Della, then at Lila, then back at the sheriff. "No," Cal said quietly. The word hung in the air like a grenade. Landry's face darkened. "Excuse me." Cal's voice strengthened. I said no. You want my badge? Come take it. But I'm not walking away from a child who was literally thrown in the trash and then stolen from a hospital bed. Brick's smile finally cracked. Sheriff, this is getting out of hand. Landry stepped forward. Brenner, you're making a mistake. Cade moved beside Cal. He's making the first smart choice of the night. Jackson joined them, arms crossed. And if you want to take the kid, you're going to have to go through all of us. Della's throat burned. She had spent years believing the world was divided into them and her. But here, in a cold parking lot, a disgraced deputy and two bikers were standing between her and the kind of power that usually won without a fight. Sheriff Landry looked at Brick. Brick's face had lost its warmth. Sheriff, this is your county. Handle it. Landry hesitated. And in that hesitation, Della saw something she hadn't expected. Fear. Not fear of her. Not fear of the bikers. Fear of Brick. Landry pulled out his phone and stepped aside, speaking in low tones. Brick walked closer, stopping just a few feet from Della. His eyes dropped to Lila, then back to Della. You don't know what you're protecting, he said softly. That child doesn't belong to you. She never did. Della's voice was steel. Then prove it. Brick's smile returned, colder this time. I don't have to. The law will. He turned and walked back toward his car, a sleek black sedan parked near the entrance. As he opened the door, he called back. Della, if you really want answers, ask yourself why Rowan had a key to Unit 19, and what he was protecting when he died. The door shut. The engine purred. Brick drove away like he hadn't just tried to steal a child. Della's hands shook. Lemmy tugged her sleeve. Ma, what's Unit 19? Della reached under her shirt and pulled out the thin chain with the key. Cade's eyes locked onto it. You still have it. Della nodded. Rowan said if anything ever happened to him, this would explain everything. Jackson glanced at the patrol cars. Then we need to move. Now. Sheriff Landry ended his call and turned back. Everyone stays put until Child Protective Services arrives. Della's heart sank. CPS meant paperwork. Paperwork meant time. Time meant Brick could rewrite the story. Cal stepped forward again. Sir, if CPS takes her into custody without a full investigation, she'll disappear. You know it. I know it. Landry's face was unreadable. That's not my call anymore, Brenner. You made sure of that. Rhea appeared in the hospital doorway, breathless. Sheriff, I need to speak to you. Now. Landry frowned. Ma'am, this isn't. Rhea's voice cut through. I pulled Lila's medical records. She has a birthmark. Left shoulder blade. Shaped like a crescent moon. Della's breath caught. Rhea looked directly at her. If you have the same birthmark, Della, that's biological evidence. The parking lot went silent. Della stared at Rhea. How did you? Rhea's eyes were fierce. Because I saw your shoulder when you reached for the top shelf in the break room last month. And I never forget a mark like that. Della's mind spun. 7 years ago, they told her the baby died. 7 years ago, someone sealed an envelope with Rowan's photo and a date. And now, a little girl with her birthmark was in her arms. Sheriff Landry looked uncomfortable. That's not conclusive. Rhea crossed her arms. Then test it. DNA. It takes 48 hours. If you're so sure she's not Della's, prove it. Brick's words echoed in Della's head. She never did belong to you. But what if she did? What if the grief Della carried for 7 years was built on a lie? Kate stepped closer. Della, if that key opens what I think it does, you'll have more than DNA. You'll have names, dates, transactions. Della looked down at Lila. The girl's eyes were heavy, exhausted, but she hadn't let go of Della's jacket. If I give her to CPS now, Della said slowly, I might never see her again. Cal's voice was quiet. If you run, they'll call it kidnapping. Della met his eyes. And if I stay, they'll call it something worse. She made her choice. Rhea, Della said, file the DNA request. Make it official. Rhea nodded. I will. Della turned to Cade. Unit 19. Where is it? Cade pulled out his phone and typed fast. North Side Storage. 10 minutes from here. Landry stepped forward. You're not going anywhere. Della didn't argue. She just started walking toward Jackson's bike, Lila still in her arms, Lemmy trailing close. Ma'am, Landry shouted. Stop, or I will have you arrested. Della stopped. She turned, looked the sheriff dead in the eye, and said, then arrest me. But you better be ready to explain why you're protecting a man who puts children in trash bins. Landry's hand hovered over his weapon. Cal stepped in front of him. Sir, don't. Move, Brenner. No. The two men stared at each other. Cade motioned to Della. Go. We'll hold them. Della didn't wait. She climbed onto the back of Jackson's bike. Lila pressed against her chest. Lemmy squeezed in front of her. Jackson kicked the engine to life. Hold on tight, little man. Lemmy grabbed the handlebar. The bike roared out of the parking lot. Behind them, Sheriff Landry shouted orders. Cal wrestled with his former boss. Cade stood his ground, arms wide, daring anyone to move past him. And as the hospital lights faded in the rearview mirror, Della whispered into Lila's hair, I'm going to find out who you are. And if you're mine, no one will ever take you again. Northside Storage loomed ahead, dark and silent. But as Jackson pulled up to Unit 19, Della saw the lock had already been cut. The door was open. Someone had been there first. Northside Storage sat behind a strip of closed shops in Dayton, Ohio, its rows of metal doors stretching into the dark like teeth. The only light came from a flickering security lamp near the office, making the place look half abandoned, half watching. Jackson killed the engine in front of Unit 19. The bike's rumble died, leaving only the hum of the distant highway and Lemmy's shaky breathing. Della slid off the bike with Lila still in her arms. Lemmy climbed down, knees wobbly. He stared at the door in front of them. The lock on Unit 19 hung useless, cut clean through. The hasp was bent like someone had pried too hard. Someone beat us here, Jackson muttered. No cameras on this side, he added, glancing up. Convenient. Della's fingers tightened on the key still hanging from her chain. She had carried it for 7 years, believing it was the thing she would use to open the truth. Now someone had opened it first. She shifted Lila carefully into Lemmy's arms. Hold her tight. Don't move unless I say. Lemmy nodded, his small jaw set in a way that made him look older than 7. He cradled Lila like she was the most important secret in the world. Della took a breath and stepped to the door. Ready? Jackson asked. Della didn't answer. She just gripped the handle and lifted. The door rolled up with a rattling groan. Inside, Unit 19 looked like a small, frozen time capsule. Metal shelves lined the walls, stacked with bankers' boxes, old helmets, a pair of boots, and a leather jacket wrapped carefully in plastic. Rowan's jacket. Della's chest clenched. That jacket had been on his body the day he died. She'd never seen it again. A folding table stood in the middle of the unit. On it sat a small metal lockbox and a stack of neatly organized folders. Dust lay undisturbed on almost everything. Almost. The lockbox was clean in one spot, as if a hand had rested there recently. Della stepped inside. Stay by the door, she told the kids without looking back. If anything feels wrong, you yell. Jackson stayed at the entrance, keeping his body between the open lot and the storage unit. Della moved to the table. Her hands hovered over the leather jacket first. She peeled back the plastic and touched the worn patch on the shoulder. For a moment, she was back in another life. Rowdy bars, backroad rides, laughter that tasted like risk. Then she saw the name stitched on the front. Rowan Voss. Her throat burned. Under the jacket, taped to the underside of the hanger, was an envelope. She tore it free. Inside was a short note, written in Rowan's messy, stubborn handwriting. Della, if you're reading this, I didn't listen. I took Brick's job anyway. I thought I could control it. I was wrong. Unit 19 has what he wants to burn. If something happens to me, don't trust the uniforms. Trust the paper. It doesn't forget. Della's hands shook. She set the note down and opened the first folder on the table. There were copies of birth certificates, hospital logs, emergency room transfer sheets. Some names were blacked out. Others weren't. At the top of one stack, a header read, Blackwater Regional Medical, Neonatal. Her eyes tracked down the page. Date, 7 years ago. Mother, Della Voss. Infant, female. Status, transferred, specialty care. Not deceased. Transferred. A second page, stapled behind it, bore a different hospital's name in another state. The infant ID matched, but the mother's name did not. Mother, Cara Mullen. Brick's last name. Della's knees almost gave out. Jackson saw her sway. You okay? No, Della said, voice raw. Keep watching the door. She turned to the metal lockbox. It was heavy, cold. The keyhole looked old. She slid Rowan's key into it and turned. The lock popped. Inside were photographs. Rowan holding a bundled newborn, face softer than she'd ever seen it. A nurse passing the baby through a doorway to a woman whose face wasn't fully visible, but whose hand wore a familiar silver ring. documents signed with names she knew too well. And at the bottom, a small hospital bracelet with a baby's name printed in fading ink. Lila Voss. Della pressed a hand to her mouth. Lemmy whispered from the doorway, "Ma?" Her eyes filled. She looked back at him and at the little girl he held. Lila's eyes were half closed but watching, as if some piece of her had always been listening for this moment. Della picked up the bracelet and turned it between her fingers. The birthmark on Lila's shoulder. The crescent moon. 7 years. The transfer. The lies. Her baby had not died. Her baby had been taken. Della closed the box, chest shaking with something too big for tears. Everyone watching this, if you believe no child should be stolen, no mother lied to, hit subscribe. People like Brick count on your silence. Don't give it to them. She turned back to the folders. There were more names. More infants. More transfers. Some had ended in adoption. Some didn't have an ending at all. Rowan had tried to document it, to build a paper trail that outlived him. He had hidden the evidence in Unit 19, and Brick had been trying to erase it ever since. Jackson's voice broke through her thoughts. We've got company. Headlights swept across the storage lane, slow and deliberate. A car rolled past the entrance, backed up, and turned in. For 1 second, Della hoped it was Cal. Then she saw the sheriff's emblem on the doors. Sheriff Landry's cruiser pulled up 2 units down. Another car followed. Their lights went off in sync. Jackson cursed under his breath. They tracked us faster than I thought. Della stuffed the bracelet into her pocket, grabbed the most critical folders, the neonatal file, the Lila transfer, Rowan's note, and slipped them into the inside of her jacket. Hide the rest, she said. Jackson moved fast, sliding boxes back into shadows, tossing an empty one over the lockbox, making the unit look less explosive than it truly was. Della stepped back toward the door, Lila now clinging to her neck, Lemmy pressed against her side. The cruiser doors opened. Sheriff Landry stepped out first. This time, he didn't look uncertain. He looked determined. Behind him, 2 deputies followed, hands already near their guns. Landry's gaze swept the scene and landed on Della. You're making this worse for yourself. Della didn't flinch. I'm making it harder for him to hide what he's done. Landry's jaw tightened. You can't take evidence from a potential crime scene and run with it. That's obstruction. Obstruction, Della repeated. Like moving a kidnapped child in a hospital bag. Landry's eyes flicked, just for a heartbeat. You're out of your depth. Maybe, Della said. But I'm in my lane. Protecting a child. Exposing a thief. She stepped forward, so the overhead light caught her face. If you're watching this, and you're tired of people with money rewriting the truth, hit subscribe. Let stories like this reach the people who need courage to speak. Landry looked at the kids, at the unit, at the faint glow of the city beyond the fence. Then he said something that made Della's skin crawl. You think this is about one girl? He nodded at the unit. You have no idea how big this is. From the dark end of the storage row, another pair of headlights flicked on, Cade's bike and a second one behind it. Reinforcements were coming, but so was the storm. Cade's bike rolled into the lane like it belonged there, engine growling low. Beside him, another rider pulled up, a woman this time, hair tucked under her helmet, eyes sharp even behind the visor. They parked between Landry's cruisers and Unit 19, a human wall made of leather and stubbornness. The woman killed her engine and flipped up her visor. You picked a cute spot for a war, Murrow. Cade gave a half smile. Good to see you too, Helia. Helia Quaid. The name sent a faint ripple through Della's memory. Rowan had mentioned her once, one of the few people in the club he actually respected. A woman who could ride, fight, and think circles around men twice her size. Sheriff Landry didn't hide his irritation. This is not your business. Helia's eyes narrowed. Children being sold on paper and buried in landfills belongs to all of us. One of the deputies stepped forward. Ma'am, you need to leave. Helia looked at his hand, resting near his holster. You planning to shoot the truth, officer? Or just hope it stops talking? Della almost smiled despite the tension. Landry exhaled. This ends now. Della Voss, hand over any documents you removed from this unit. Surrender the child. We'll let the system handle the rest. The system, Della repeated, the word bitter in her mouth. She thought of the birth certificate stamped, transferred, of the adoption forms with Brick's name buried in the fine print, of the empty boxes waiting for new stolen names. The system did this, she said. With your help. With Brick's money. Landry's eyes hardened. You don't know what you're talking about. Della reached into her jacket and pulled out Rowan's note. She didn't hold it like evidence. She held it like a wound. 7 years ago, she said, voice steady. Brick offered Rowan a job moving records. Rowan took it. He thought he could control it. He realized too late it wasn't paperwork. It was people. She lifted the neonatal file. This is my daughter's transfer. From Blackwater Regional to a facility on paper, but in reality, to nowhere. To someone Brick could sell her to. I was told she died. Brick told someone else she lived. And you signed off on the logs that made that lie legal. Landry's shoulders sagged the tiniest bit. You don't understand the pressure we were under. Helia's eyebrows rose. Oh good. He's admitting it. Landry looked at her. There were threats. Deals made above my head. I thought if we controlled it, at least it wouldn't get worse. Della stepped closer. How many children? Landry didn't answer. Jackson spoke up, voice low. If you're watching this, and your gut is twisting because this sounds too real, like the kind of thing money makes possible, drop a comment that says, no more secrets. Let the algorithm know you're not okay with this. Landry's gaze flickered between them. You think a video changes anything? Della shook her head. No, but a video plus paper? Plus names? Plus a town that finally sees what its good men are doing? That changes everything. Lemmy's small voice cut through the tension. Sheriff, did you know they were going to throw her away? Landry looked at the 7-year-old boy standing there with fear and courage mixed in his eyes. For a moment, the sheriff's mask cracked. He looked old, tired, guilty. I knew something was wrong, Landry said quietly. I told myself I was buying time, that if we didn't cooperate, worse people would step in. Della's voice softened, but only a little. So you chose the kids to pay the bill. Helia stepped forward. You don't get to hide behind fear while children get buried in paperwork and dirt. Landry's hand trembled by his side. From somewhere beyond the storage yard, a siren wailed. Not police. Not ambulance. Media. The first camera vans were arriving. Jackson's phone vibrated. He glanced at it. They're already outside the gate. Cade smirked faintly. Brick wanted this quiet. He's about to get a crowd. Landry closed his eyes for a second, then opened them again. Give me the files, he said. All of them. I'll take them to the state attorney. We'll open a case that doesn't stop at the county line. Della studied him. Why should I trust you now? Because if you don't, Landry said, Brick will say these files never existed. He'll have judges, lawyers, and doctors saying this was all your grief talking. And you'll be one woman against a machine. He looked at Lila, still clinging to Della. And she doesn't have time for you to fight alone. Silence stretched. Cade broke it. There's another option. Everyone looked at him. Make it public, he said. Right now? On paper and on camera. Helia nodded slowly. You dump truth into the same world where he dumps people. See which one sticks. Della's mind raced. If she handed everything quietly to Landry, there was a chance it vanished in some back office. If she held on to it alone, she could be crushed. But if she made Brick's secret big enough, loud enough, ugly enough in front of enough eyes, he couldn't bury it all. The narrator's voice cut in, steady and urgent. If you believe light is the only thing that scares men like Brick, hit subscribe and share this story. Don't let it die in one town. Della looked at Helia. You still know how to get a video out fast. Helia's smile was sharp. I know someone who does. She pulled out her phone and dialed. Tavi? Yeah, I've got something for you. Think small town scandal meets federal crime. Bring every camera you own. Landry watched, torn between duty, fear, and a sliver of conscience that refused to die. Finally, he sighed. You have 10 minutes before I have to pretend I didn't agree to this. Della nodded. We don't need more than that, she said. She stepped back into the storage unit, gathered the key files, Rowan's note, Lila's transfer documents, the neonatal log, a handful of other babies' records, and laid them on the table under the harsh unit light. Helia set her phone up on a makeshift stand. Whenever you're ready, she said. Della looked at the papers, at Lila, at Lemmy, at the men and women who had chosen to stand here instead of look away. Then she began to speak. Not as a biker's widow, not as a town's rumor, as a mother whose grief had been weaponized. If you're seeing this, she would say into the lens, it means somebody tried to throw my child away. It means they lied to me. It means they lied to this whole town. Her story, their proof, the names, the dates, it all poured out. And outside the storage yard, more headlights gathered. As Della finished speaking, Helia's phone buzzed with a notification. The video had gone live. Within 30 seconds, comments began flooding in, from Blackwater, from other states, from people who recognized hospital names and dates, and had stories of their own. The upload bar crawled across Helia's phone screen, then flashed, live. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the comments started. At first, they trickled in. People from Blackwater recognizing Della's face, arguing in the chat, calling her a liar, calling her a hero, calling Rowan a criminal, calling him a whistleblower. Then another kind of comment appeared. I gave birth at Blackwater Regional 7 years ago, and they told me my boy died in transport. My sister's baby got transferred, and we never saw a body. My niece vanished from a hospital in Kentucky. That form looks just like ours. Helia's eyes moved over the screen. It's spreading. Jackson peered over her shoulder. Fast. The viewer count ticked upward like a gas pump. 1,000. 5,000. 10. The algorithm had caught the scent of outrage and truth. Della stood in the open doorway of Unit 19, the stack of files behind her, Lila on her hip, Lemmy pressed to her side. The cold night air carried the faint hum of distant highways and the nearer buzz of tires as more cars rolled into the storage lot. Some were news vans. Some were just locals with phones. Sheriff Landry watched it all with the look of a man who had spent years building a dam and was now hearing the first cracks. You've made yourself a target, he said quietly. Della didn't look at him. I've been a target since the day I married Rowan. The difference is, this time the gun's pointed at the right person. From the corner of the lot, a familiar black sedan pulled in. Brick Mullen stepped out. No mask now, no polite smile. The ring on his finger caught the storage lights, cold and bright. He walked toward them, shoes crunching on gravel, jaw tight. Turn that off, he said to Helia, voice cold. Helia didn't move. Can't. It's already everywhere. Brick's eyes slid to the camera, then to the growing line of people outside the gate, some holding up their phones, some just staring. The news van doors opened. A reporter shuffled out with a mic, eyes wide with the thrill of fresh blood. Brick inhaled, then exhaled, switching masks mid-breath. He smiled. This is all very dramatic, he said, projecting his voice now. But these are private medical records. You're violating patient privacy. You're slandering good people. Jackson muttered under his breath. Here we go. Della stepped out of the unit fully, so the light fell on her and Lila. Good people don't put children in trash bins, she said. Good people don't lie to mothers about dead babies. Good people don't sign papers that move infants like packages. Brick's smile tightened. You are grieving, Della. I understand. Grief plays tricks on the mind. Rowan was not a good man. He was involved with dangerous people. He made mistakes. He tried to fix one, Della said. You just made sure he didn't live long enough to finish the job. Gasps rippled through the small crowd gathering by the gate. Brick's ringed hand flexed. If you're watching this, the narrator's voice would say, steady and low, and you believe men like this should never get to hide behind charity dinners and church donations. Hit subscribe and comment, no more buried truth. Make sure this story stays visible. A local reporter stepped closer, mic raised. Mr. Mullen, did you have any connection to the transfer of infants out of Blackwater Regional? Brick turned the full weight of his charm toward the camera. Absolutely not. I donate to that hospital. I would never harm children. Helia flipped the phone screen, showing the live feed to Della. Comments say one of the names in the file belongs to a kid adopted in Indiana. They're tagging the family. It's climbing. Brick saw the screen, and for the first time tonight, real fear flickered in his eyes. This is reckless, he snapped. You're stirring up conspiracy nuts. You're going to hurt innocent families. Della's voice softened. Dangerous. Innocent families were hurt when you sold their children. We're not creating pain. We're uncovering it. The crowd at the gate grew louder. Murmurs, shouts, a few people calling Brick's name in accusations, not praise. Did you steal my sister's baby, Brick? A woman yelled. You looked my mama in the eye at the funeral. Brick's jaw clenched. I will sue every one of you, he hissed. Helia smiled without humor. You'll have to stand still long enough for a judge to see your face. Sheriff Landry stepped forward, torn between his old pattern and this new, brutal honesty. Mr. Mullen, you need to come with us. Brick stared at him. On what charge? Landry looked at Della, at the files, at the phone, at the crowd. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Suspicion of child trafficking. Tampering with medical records. Pick one, Landry said. Or we can go for all of them. Brick's eyes went cold. You won't make this stick, he said. You don't have the backbone. Or the friends. Cal's voice spoke up from behind Landry. They hadn't heard him arrive. But he was there now. No badge. No uniform. Just a man who'd made a choice. He doesn't need friends, Cal said. He's got evidence. And a whole lot of angry parents watching. Della met Cal's gaze. For the first time, there was no wall between them. If you're watching and you've ever had to stand up to someone everyone else bowed to, hit subscribe. Stories like this aren't just entertainment. They're armor. Landry lifted his chin. Brick Mullen, you're under arrest. He moved forward cautiously, cuffs in hand. Brick's mouth twisted into something like a snarl. You think this ends with me? He spat. You think I'm the only one who ever signed a form? Whoever took a call? Your children playing with matches in a refinery. He didn't resist when Landry cuffed him. He didn't need to. His words did the fighting now. As Landry led him past the unit, Brick turned his head toward Della. You could have lived the rest of your life not knowing, he said quietly. Now you'll never sleep again. Della's grip on Lila tightened, but her voice stayed calm. I haven't slept right since they told me she died, she said. This is an upgrade. The crowd parted as the sheriff's car pulled away, Brick in the back, the ring on his hand catching flashes of camera light like a warning bell. The air that remained felt lighter and heavier at the same time. Helia checked her phone. Video just crossed 100,000 views. Comments are on fire. People are tagging journalists, lawyers, charities. Jackson blew out a low whistle. Brick wanted darkness. You gave him stadium lights. Della looked down at Lila. The little girl's eyes were drooping, her head resting against Della's chest. She looked safe for the first time since the landfill. If you stayed to this part of the story, thank you. That alone means you're not the kind of person who turns away when things get hard. If you want more stories where mercy has teeth and justice wears a leather jacket, hit subscribe and stay with this channel. This fight isn't fiction for a lot of people. As the storage yard began to clear, Della's phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number, one she almost refused. She answered. On the other end, a woman's voice, shaking, said, My name is Kara. 7 years ago, I signed papers I didn't understand. I think your daughter was sold to me. The motel room they borrowed for the meeting was cheap, but it was quiet. The hum of the air conditioner covered the thin walls. Outside, Dayton's neon flickered, trying and failing to look glamorous. Inside, Della sat on the edge of the bed, Lila curled up next to her, head on her lap. Lemmy sat cross-legged on the carpet, a coloring book open in front of him that he barely used. Cade leaned against the door, arms folded. Helia and Jackson took the 2 chairs, both alert, both trying to look relaxed and failing. A soft knock sounded. Cade checked the peephole, then opened the door halfway. The woman who stepped in looked like she hadn't slept since the video went live. Late 30s, hair pulled back, clothes neat but tired. Her hands shook as she clutched her bag. My name is Kara Mullen, she said. I didn't keep his last name. Not after I realized what he did. But the paper doesn't care what I sign, only what it says. Della studied her. There was no polish here, no charm. Just guilt and something like bravery. You signed adoption papers, Della said. Kara nodded. 7 years ago. Brick said he was helping a young mother who couldn't afford to raise her baby. He showed me documents. He said it was all legal. Her voice broke. He told me the mother knew. That she chose me. Della's hand rested on Lila's back, fingers feeling the rise and fall of each small breath. And you believed him, Della said. I wanted to, Kara whispered. I couldn't have children. He said this was my chance. I told myself it was a blessing. She looked at Lila, then quickly away. Tears gathered in her eyes. When she was 3, Kara said, Brick started acting strange. Asking to see her. Asking questions. He said we owed him. I told him no. He made things very hard after that. Work. Money. Friends. Helia's jaw clenched. He likes strings. Kara nodded. When I saw your video, my stomach dropped. The dates. The hospital name. The files. I looked in my own drawer and found this. She opened her bag and pulled out a folder. Inside were copies of the same forms Della had seen in Unit 19. Birth certificate. Transfer. Adoption. The signatures lined up. The lies matched. Lila, Della said softly. Could you sit up for a second, sweetheart? The little girl stirred. Sleepy eyes blinked open. She pushed herself up, leaning against Della's side. This lady, Della said gently, Took care of you when your mama didn't know where you were. She fed you. She kept you warm. That matters. Lila looked at Kara, brow furrowing. Kara covered her mouth with her hand, shoulders shaking. I thought I was rescuing her, she choked out. I didn't know I was part of a theft. Della's voice stayed steady. Brick is the thief. He stole from both of us. From all of us. Lemmy looked between them, confusion and hope wrestling in his small face. So she's got two moms. The room went quiet. Then Della did something she hadn't planned. She reached out her free hand to Kara. Sit, she said. You don't have to stand alone for this part. Kara hesitated, then sat on the bed, leaving a thin strip of space between them. Lila looked up at Della, then at Kara. Small fingers crept across the blanket, searching. Kara met them halfway. The narrator's voice softened, turning from steel to something warmer. Sometimes the only way to beat a man who divides is to refuse to be divided. If you believe families can be built out of broken pieces without pretending the cracks never happened, hit subscribe and share this with someone who needs that hope. Cade cleared his throat. We turned over copies of the files to the state. Brick's going to have a very long conversation with people he doesn't control. Landry's cooperating. Cal's doing penance. Will it be enough? Della asked. Hillia leaned forward. It's a start. The rest is slow work. Courtrooms. Reporters. Paper. But Brick isn't operating in the dark anymore. And every parent watching that video is going to be asking questions he can't afford. Jackson looked at Lemmy. As for this little man, we're making sure nobody can threaten him behind a dumpster ever again. We've got eyes on his neighborhood now. The shiny ring crowd won't like the new company. Lemmy smiled for the first time in what felt like days. Does this mean you're like my uncles? He asked. Jackson grinned. We'll take the title. Comes with noise and bad advice, though. The room softened with a small ripple of laughter. Outside, a siren wailed and faded. Life in Dayton went on. People working, drinking, sleeping, scrolling past their screens. But for this little cluster of souls, everything had shifted. Della looked at Lila. We'll do the tests, she said. Make it official. But I don't need paper to tell me what my bones already know. She brushed Lila's hair back, revealing the small crescent birthmark on her shoulder blade. When you were born, Della whispered, I told the nurse it looked like the moon was kissing your skin. They laughed, said I was a sentimental fool. Her eyes shone. I'm okay with being a fool if it means I get to be your mother again. Lila didn't understand all the words, but she understood the tone. She leaned into Della's side, small body fitting into the hollow that had been waiting for 7 years. Kara watched, tears falling freely now. I don't want to lose her, she whispered. Della turned to her. You're not losing her. Brick doesn't get to make us enemies. He did enough damage. She took a breath. Maybe she gets two moms, Della said. One who carried her. One who carried her when the world lied. If the court asks, we'll both show up. Together. Kara covered her face with her hands and sobbed. Lemmy scooted closer to Lila and took her hand. We can all be a family, he said matter-of-factly. Just not the bad kind with secret rings. The narrator's voice smiled, a quiet warmth. If you stayed all the way to this point, you didn't just watch a story. You walked through the dark with these people until morning. Thank you for that. Hillia checked her phone one last time. Videos over 1 million now. Hashtags are trending. Law firms are sniffing around. This won't disappear. Kate pushed off the door. We'll ride back to Blackwater tomorrow. Landfill won't recognize itself. Might even get cleaned up for once. Jackson nodded toward Della. You sure about staying here tonight? Della looked at the 3 kids, because Kara, in some ways, still counted as one when it came to this pain. Then she looked at the patched leather hanging over the back of the chair, Rowan's jacket, waiting for whatever came next. Yeah, she said. For the first time in a long time, I'm not afraid to stay. Cade tipped his chin. If anyone comes knocking who shouldn't, call. We're closer than we look. They left quietly, the door clicking shut behind them. The room settled into a soft, exhausted peace. Lemmy fell asleep on the floor, crayon still in hand. Lila drifted off against Della's side. Kara eventually rested her head against the wall, eyes closed, breathing evening out. Della stared at the cracked ceiling for a long time. The world outside was still broken. Courts would drag. People would deny. Brick would have friends in places she didn't even know existed. But here, in this cheap motel room in Dayton, 3 children were breathing. No one was throwing them away tonight. The narrator's voice dropped to a final, gentle cadence. In the end, Blackwater didn't get a neat fairy tale. It got something harder and more honest. A town forced to look at what it had buried and a woman who refused to stay buried with it. If this story moved you, if you believe every missing piece deserves a name and every lost child deserves a home, thank you for watching, for feeling, for staying. A beat. Then the last line, quiet as a heartbeat after a storm. In a world that throws people away, sometimes the loudest miracle is when someone simply holds on and doesn't let go. Thank you for listening to this story. If you want more long, raw, redemptive tales like this, stories where kindness walks into the dark and doesn't back down, please subscribe, share this video, and let your comment be your stand.